What's up, my friends, and welcome into Forte Catholic. I am Taylor Schroll, and today I'm going to be sharing a Catholic perspective on 1988's movie Willow. There's a new series that is out now. It just started streaming here just a few weeks ago. After over 30 years, Willow is back, and I wanted to watch the series, but I realized I hadn't ever watched the movie. I know, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. You'd think with it being George Lucas's fantasy, after Star Wars being his sci-fi series, that I would have watched it. Well, I didn't until last week, and I have some thoughts. So I saw the trailer for this new Willow series on Disney Plus. I saw that it was coming out this winter, and I was like, man, that looks really good. I really want to watch it, but I hadn't watched the original yet. And while, yes, some people were surprised that I hadn't seen it yet with how big of a Star Wars and George Lucas fan I am, at the same time, you got to be a little fair. It was 1988, and I didn't exist yet. I didn't come around until 1989. So my wife and I sat down to watch this Willow movie on Disney Plus to prepare ourselves for the series. Now, my wife had watched it. She grew up watching it as a kid. It's been kind of a funny, as I've been sharing about watching the movie and watching the show, a lot of people have been like, some people share, oh yeah, we watched it all the time as a kid, or I never even heard of it or watched it. So there seems to be no in between. It's like you either loved and watched this movie or you never even heard of it, right? And that's the camp that I found myself in. So I sat down to watch the movie, and I tell you what, I learned a lot and I had a very good experience. I knew coming into it that it was a George Lucas creation, right? So his sci-fi creation was Star Wars. I'm a big fan. And that this was his like fantasy creation. What I didn't know is that it was Warwick Davis's, the actor who I've known and seen from Star Wars movies and Harry Potter movies and all these sorts of things. This was his debut. He was 18 years old when this movie came out, and he was the lead. He is Willow. I thought that was really cool. I also didn't know that Ron Howard directed this, who's been a big part of my life all growing up too, with his movies and shows and that sort of thing. So a lot about this movie that I didn't know, and like everything that I learned about it made me more and more surprised that I had never seen this movie. So sat down to watch it. Going through the credits, I was like, man, this is already like really impressive, everybody that they had in this. And one of my big takeaways as I'm watching this is that the timing of it is very interesting. So obviously this is like I can see where the influences came from in George Lucas's creation, but I can also see how this movie influenced things that have come out of it. So like the biggest and most obvious comparison is to Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Like you can see very much that George Lucas was taking themes and even like some character arcs and that sort of thing from The Lord of the Rings, because The Lord of the Rings books had been written, but this movie came out before The Lord of the Rings movies. So it's this interesting influence thing where I'm seeing a lot of things in this Willow movie that were influenced by Tolkien and his writings. But then I just did a rewatch of all of the Tolkien Lord of the Rings movies. Me and Tea with Tolkien talked about those. You can check out those videos here. But I saw a lot of influences in those movies from this movie Willow. So it's just very interesting how like Tolkien started it, like this big old fantasy genre, right? He was like the king of it. And then Lucas shared his take on it, like definitely taking some things from Tolkien, but then the Tolkien movies definitely took things from obviously Lord of the Rings and Tolkien, but also from this movie. So some similarities that I saw that were kind of funny. There's just so much Lord of the Rings, you can definitely see the Lord of the Rings stamp on this movie. Things like Eric's army showing up at the last minute to save Madmartigan and the good guys, just like in Lord of the Rings, and which obviously the book was before, the movie is after, but also in things like Game of Thrones and things like Netflix's The Last Kingdom, like kind of this trope of like, our bad guys are defeated, and then all of a sudden this army that you weren't counting on comes and saves the day. I just thought that was like, as I'm watching the movie with my wife, who had seen this movie since she was a kid, I'm like pointing out like, oh, that's Star Wars, that's Lord of the Rings, that's Last Kingdom, like just pointing out little things that were very similar to these other stories that we love. And then like obviously the comp of like Madmartigan as like the Han Solo character. So it's just really funny that like, so Lucas is doing his take on Lord of the Rings, but he's also doing like a fantasy take of Star Wars. Like, so I think I tweeted out the other day that jokingly that if the Willow creator or if the Star Wars creator ever found out about Willow, he'd probably sue the creator because obviously it's both George Lucas. But I thought it was funny. Nobody else seemed to. But so I figured I'd share it here because the joke didn't work the first time. So let's see if it works the second time. Okay, let's talk a little bit about some of the themes and some of the moments of the movie that I really liked. Right from the get-go, I thought about watching this movie with my son, and then I kind of Googled it, and he doesn't really like scary stuff. And I Googled it, and I found out about this first scene where like babies are being killed, and I'm like, nope. He's not watching it, which is why I waited and just watched it with my wife after my son went to sleep. But it starts off with like there's a prophecy of this chosen one who is going to, defeat the ultimate evil, right? And I immediately thought of like Moses and Jesus, because both in Moses' time and in Jesus' time, there's this prophecy that one of these people will rise up and defeat the kings, and the kings don't like that, so they go out and they try to kill all the babies, which is why we get Moses being put in the water in a wicker basket, or what wicker, but you know what I mean, like it get put in a basket and sent down the river. And then we get Jesus having to flee to Egypt. So we have this baby here, Elora Danan, being sent down the river, very much to be saved from this evil that wants to kill all these babies. I just thought that was a pretty telling, oh, that's biblical, right? One of the funny things, like some surprising things that I really liked is like, so we're introduced to the Nelwyn, which are like, the dwarves or the hobbits, these other things that we're pretty similar to. And the Nelwyn is the name of them. So Willow, Warwick Davis, is a Nelwyn. And we spend a lot of time with them. And you get to know pretty quickly that like, oh yeah, that they have like the big folks, right? Like the average size humans, right? So you spend some time with the Nelwyns, and then we get to meet the brownies, who are like these even smaller. They're incredibly small. So I just thought it was interesting that like they're trying to show how much the Nelwyns are small, kind of like the hobbits are. But then there's like they're like little fairies, right? Like they're incredibly tiny. So I just liked that we started small and then went even smaller. And they were the brownies were absolutely like the comic relief in the movie. But we talked a little bit about, the Elora Danan being sent down the river. And I tell you what, the most surprising thing about watching this movie was typically, like, I assumed that Willow was the chosen one. Because that's typically what happens. It's like, whether it's Frodo or Aragorn, right? They're like, Frodo is like the main person that's, gonna be the person that ultimately destroys all this evil, or Aragorn, like the rightful heir to the throne coming up. So when I heard Willow, I just assumed Willow was going to be the person that was like the chosen one, like the Luke Skywalker of this series. But I found it fascinating that Willow is not the chosen one. Willow is the person who finds, or his kids find Elora Danan being floated down the river, and Elora Danan is the chosen one, right? So it's like, this isn't the story. If we could use the biblical example, this isn't the story of Moses, or it wouldn't be named after, that movie wouldn't have been named Moses. It would have been named after like the person who found Moses in the river. And I just found that fascinating because like I'm so used to having like, your Luke Skywalkers, your Uhtredson from Last Kingdom, like the main people being the focus, and the show's either named after them or completely focuses on them. But essentially this entire movie, Willow is the person who is helping along the chosen one. Like the main character, the one who is set to defeat evil. Like Willow isn't the person who's prophesied to defeat evil forever. And I thought it was a really cool experience to be watching this show and like not be focused on the chosen one, because Willow's just a normal person. He has some magical ability, but it's limited, and he actually ends up using like sleight of hand, like how we think of magicians today, not like magician like Gandalf, like super powerful magic. Like he has a couple of real magic, but for the most part he's doing like sleight of hand kind of stuff to as he goes on. But like essentially he's like the Samwise Gamgee of this story. Like he is the friend assisting and guiding this baby, Elora Danan, who is the chosen one. So what I like about the story is it's a story of like Willow's boldness and stepping out and going on this adventure and essentially protecting this baby, right? Which I don't know. I feel like I'm not finding the perfect words for it, but it was just really cool to follow somebody who wasn't really the main character of the story, who wasn't the chosen one, the big one, right? Even though the movie is named Willow, the chosen one is Elora Danan. So I know a lot of times, like sometimes it can feel like, oh yeah, I'm the main character in my own story because we live in our minds, we live with our own thoughts, and we kind of make decisions based on where we're going, right? But watching Willow be able to make decisions for the best, the better of Elora Danan, for the best of somebody else. It's that selfless love and that sacrificial love that really stuck out to me, because I can think I'm the hero in my own story pretty often, right? That pride comes in, or just kind of naturally, it's like, yeah, I'm hearing my thoughts all day, not somebody else's, because that would be a whole other problem all on its own. But it reminded me to be like, okay, other people's needs and the grand vision. It's like, I'm not the hero of the world, right? Like I'm just a guy trying to be a good Catholic, trying to be a good podcaster, YouTuber, speaker, like all these sorts of things. It's like I can do some things that are heroic in my work life, in my own personal life, but it's like I'm not the hero, right? Like Jesus is the hero, so obviously I need to be pointing to him. But even I thought about it more in like my relationships with other people, like wanting the best for other people, striving for other people. So it was a mind shift for me, and just a reminder of like, hey, get out of your own head and your own focus, and let's focus on other people. And it was perfect for the holidays, right? The whole idea of like, yes, it's nice to receive gifts, but ultimately it's like giving gifts, like especially to my kids, like the joy and the wonder of kids around Christmas reminds us of the joy and wonder of Christmas. So this movie was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed that perspective of like, let's focus on others and not try to be the heroes of our own story. So that was my thoughts on Willow from 1988. I thought it held up pretty well. Like obviously, like some of the effects and stuff, the visual effects, like it's been over 30 years. Like obviously some of that was funny, but like I was surprised how funny this movie was intentionally. Like that was the big surprise. Like I'm used to fantasy being like super, super serious. Like Lord of the Rings takes itself pretty seriously. Yes, there's some funny moments, but it's a serious thing. Like this was just kind of lighthearted and fun and funny. And I just enjoyed this kind of fun romp through George Lucas's fantasy world. It was Mad Mardigan, just one of the best characters ever created. So much fun, so funny, imperfect, flawed. We get to see his hero's journey of choosing to do the right thing. But yeah, the comedy in this, like the end, we were joking about the end when it comes down to just Willow and the baby and the evil bad lady. And she's like, you've lost, put the baby on this sacrificial table or whatever. And he just looks at her and goes, no. Like, it's just such a fun thing for him to hear. He calls her an old hag, and then she gets like struck by lightning. Like it was just very funny, like even in the serious moments, which is like one of the big things that we're about here at Forte Catholic, talking about serious topics with some levity in there. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit subscribe so you can find some more levity and some serious conversations about our favorite comics and movies and books here on A Catholic Perspective. We also have our weekly podcast where we're trying to find joy and love and the fun within Catholicism. We've also got something that is a little bit more serious. Our Catholic Perspective, or sorry, this is the Catholic Perspective series. Our Catholic Foundation series, which is like an introduction to Catholicism, the 10 topics that every Catholic needs to know about. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please hit subscribe, check out those other videos, and we'll be back very soon.